Same day, same thing. As we take a look at Pete Prisco's top 100 free agents list. Now, this is a list on the left side before the tag deadline and on the right side after the tag. So the only player that is still on that list and has moved from number 3 to number 1 is Hargrave. And we're going to break down all of these players and their futures now as we welcome in Pete Prisco himself, taking a look at that top free agents list. We're starting with one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL, moved from that third spot over to number 1, and that is Eagles D tackle Javon Hargrave. So what does Hargrave's future look like? What do you think?
You know, it's funny, Jenny, but the league follows me. I mean, think about that. The top 4 of my top 5 guys were tagged. I mean, thanks. The NFL should give me a little something for helping them, guide them along in the process. But look, we knew those guys were all going to get tagged. At least we've had an idea they would, and that leaves Javon Hargrave as the number 1 free agent. And the only concern with Hargrave is his age. He's 30 years old, but he's coming off a season where he was dominant on the interior, got up the field, got after the quarterback, and those guys are hard to find. And so you look around the league, and there's a lot of teams that are, needy of guys on the interior who can rush the passer, and that's what Hargrave can provide. I doubt the Eagles will be able to bring him back because, you drafted Jordan Davis last year. You have an eye on him developing more on the interior. So I think this is one of those guys that's going to get out the door, and when he does, somebody's going to give him a nice contract.
We're going to keep it with the Eagles. They're going into free agency with limited cap space. They're going to have to really think about the potential of Jalen Hurts and that contract extension that he's going to want. So they didn't view the franchise tag as a good option. So Hargrave obviously in that situation. And they let Tuesday's deadline pass without locking down any of their key free agents. Philly with the most players on your list. How do you think they prioritize their needs?
Well, I think a lot of those guys will be looked at as guys who come back on team-friendly deals, maybe one-year deals. A guy like Kelsey, I think if he wants to play, he's going to come back and play. Fletcher Cox maybe on a one-year deal, team-friendly as well. And when you look at the rest of those guys, I would prioritize Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think he's a special player in what they do on defense. He can play in the slot. He can play in the deep middle. Now, some people will look at that and say, hey, there's not great value on a secondary player, which is why you like that, because you don't pick them that high. There's safeties who can play nickel. Those guys usually don't get drafted that high. But he gave them a real boost in the secondary last year, and I think he's worth keeping around. He would be my number 1 free agent for them as far as lining up guys to make sure you keep them in the fold.
So I'm not sure if the NFL is going to give you a raise looking at your free agent list and everyone that they've picked off of it, but I think here at CBS Sports HQ, we should give you a raise. So we'll talk to the bosses after this. All right, we're going to go back to your free agent list and your number 2. So Saints D-end, Marcus Davenport. He was the first-round pick in 2018. He's had his fair share of injuries, though, and really hasn't been put in the best situations. But the potential is there. So where could you see him ending up?
Yeah, and potential is the word there because clearly he hasn't played up to the expectations. Remember, they traded up to go get him, gave up a first-round pick the following year to do so, and hasn't quite lived up to the expectations. Injuries, like you mentioned, have been a problem, but he does get a lot of pressure. And when he's on the field, he's pressuring the quarterback, and I think the sacks will come. When I was there last summer, there was some feeling in the Saints building from some of the coaches that maybe Davenport was the best defensive player they had. Remember, they have Demario Davis, they have Cam Jordan. It didn't quite play to that last year, but the potential is there, and I think a team who signs him is getting a player on the rise, a player whose best football might be in front of them, and that's usually the way you want to attack free agency. So any team in need of pass rush help, good solid player in the run game as well, should take a long, hard look at Marcus Davenport.
He'd be a nice compliment on many of those teams. Now looking at your top 5, 2 names popping out, Orlando Brown, Juwan Taylor. Brown, 4-time Pro Bowler. Taylor, his biggest strength is his durability. Plus he's made huge strides this season. What do you think the future holds for those two?
Well, Jacksonville would love to bring back Juwan Taylor. Their concern is the market's going to get out of whack, and it probably will. There is such a need for offensive tackles, good offensive tackles. The problem with Taylor and his market is he's a right tackle, and he's strictly a right tackle, so I think some teams will ping him for that on his value, which might help Jacksonville be able to bring him back. Brown is now a left tackle. Remember, he came into the league, he was a right tackle. I still think he'd be better at playing right tackle, but he did some good things for the Chiefs last year. So I think they're going to be 1-2 off the board in terms of the tackle market. But keep an eye on Mike McGlinchey as well. Mike McGlinchey, who plays right tackle for the 49ers. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Taylor or McGlinchey signed early by the Chicago Bears to be their starting right tackle.
Good insight there. And when it comes down to quarterback, it all comes down to one. Jimmy Garoppolo, the lone warrior left on your top free agents list at QB. What's next for Jimmy G?
Well, I think he's got to wait and see what happens with the Jets for starters. If the Jets get Aaron Rodgers, then they're out of the quarterback market. If they don't, what are they going to do? Well, I think Jimmy Garoppolo could be in play there. He knows that system. He's familiar with it. I think he would be able to step in and play. Robert Saleh knows him from being in San Francisco, so I think that's a possibility. Also, the Texans. Bob Slowick is now the offensive coordinator with the Houston Texans. He comes over from San Francisco. They might need to get a guy who could be around for a year or so, maybe two, and let a young quarterback develop, the one they draft with the number 2 pick overall. So I think that's also a possibility. Personally, if I were a team like the Texans, I'd just draft my quarterback and play him, but that's not what teams like to do. So I do think there's a possibility a guy like Garoppolo could wind up with Bob Slowick as well with the Texans.
I'd love to see what you would do as a GM of a team, Pete Prisco. That would be fun. All right, there's some solid running back options.
It'd be a good team.
It would be a great team. Of course you would.
It'd be a good team.
Yeah. Draft them high.
I'd beat Rick Spielman.
Oh, the two of you together. I mean, it'd be epic. All right, we're going to talk about running backs now. There's some solid options up for grabs. We've got Miles Sanders, Dave Montgomery. Sanders, he rushed for over 1,000 yards this season with Philly. Montgomery had another 800-plus yard season with the Bears, both up for grabs. So where could they end up?
I saw something the other day that said the Buffalo Bills might make a run at Miles Sanders. I don't like that if they do. And here's why. I don't like giving any of these guys big deals because they're running backs and they're now working on their second contracts, which is never a good thing. But even more so, the depth of the running back class in the draft is incredible. You're going to get guys in the 4th and 5th round who are going to be productive runners in the NFL. So why waste your cap room spending it on running backs when you can draft and develop one and they're a lot cheaper? So personally, if it were me, I wouldn't be giving out big money deals to these running backs. I'd wait to the draft. But somebody gets antsy, somebody who says I need a veteran back, will probably give Sanders and Montgomery probably 3-year deals. They're not going to be mega deals. Those days are done for the running back position. So, something, a smallish deal for those guys if you want to get a veteran back in there.
You've been saying that for a while now. Pete Prisco, thanks for all of your insight when it comes to what's going on in free agency. If you're looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis, you got to look no further than the Pick 6 podcast. Our guys getting you up to speed each day in about 30 minutes. Their latest pod is the 2023 NFL Franchise Tag Recap. You got to listen and subscribe today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.